You're listening to Richard Bracewell, and I'm a lecturer on the Film and Moving Image Production course. And I directed and co-produced and co-wrote Chicken Town, which we're going to talk about today.
I'm Dr. Rota Su. I'm the lecturer of the Film and Moving Image Production, as well as MA subject lead for MA Film.
My name's Katie Jo McKeon, and I was a student, graduated last year at Norwich University of the Arts, and I got brought on as second AD for Chicken Town.
So in my professional practice, I'm a director-producer, and the idea behind this project was that we would bring an industry project and set it up in collaboration with the film course, with the object of both producing a commercial film that would get a release in the UK, because that's what I do, as I say, in my day job, but also giving industry experience and valid industry experience, so industry experience that would actually enable graduates or just recent graduates to make their first move into the industry. So we approached it as a commercial feature film production, but there were a few things that we did differently in order to bring in the dozen or so recent graduates. And by recent graduates, I mean students who had graduated about 2 weeks before the production. In Katie Jo's case, you were still a student. You were about to go into third year, third year. So that was the premise behind the film. Rota works as DIT, digital imaging technician. Now, you worked quite closely with one of the graduate students, essentially in your department. Give us a sense of what that involved.
Yeah, Seth was actually one of our year 3 specialised editor, and actually we really sort of like quite lucky to have it on board. Obviously, he was very versatile, not only actually just function as a sort of like a runner, but at the same time he worked close with me, and some of the production days I couldn't make it, that he was literally sort of like straight to the position and actually perform fantastically. Actually, not only just assist with the camera teams, obviously digital technician, image technician is actually sort of like working in the camera department, but at the same time as a bridge person, staff actually also kind of like try to do a lot of data wrangling. Was quite interesting in a way. The first time Seth was quite nervous, and not only because obviously in terms of Chicken Town was actually as a professional industry standard shoot on the set, but at the same time it was also kind of we're shooting on the ARRI raw footage, which is actually very, very heavy in terms of file size wise. It's very heavy, but in the way actually this is one of the very, very important and unique production process to compare with the commercial project. Is actually we as a staff, actually we pretty much kind of working alongside with students and graduate, and literally actually went through with them and assist them to go through in terms of how the actual industrial process to go through. And Seth, again, I think he actually performed fantastically and really sort of like pretty much sort of like complete the mission on the set, and as well as actually fulfill in terms of what the production needs as well as the camera team is actually. Yeah.
So what's required? Someone like Seth, you had trained him in the third year, but you hadn't trained him to be a professional DIT on a shoot. He had skills, but to what extent, when he was on the shoot, were you training him, and to what extent were you teaching him?
Yeah, I think it's more about sort of like clarify what's the purpose of the process. For example, so for example, when I went through in terms of the what we call the DIT reports, now I have to explain to Seth about so a lot of the details not necessarily just fit in the form, but in fact it's everything what we actually done or what we actually complete on the set. Everything will benefit for the long run to the logistics for the post productions. all the information, documents, logs, sheets, actually you can pass on to the editors, from script supervisor as well as the second AC, all the camera sheet as well as the sound recorders actually, all the information logging together, and the DIT will also kind of combine everything together, make sure not only secure the files but also make sure everything is actually all in one places. Then that communication starting from that particular point, later on the director, which is you, Richard, when you moving forward to the post production, working with the editors, everything's so clear, and I think that's really become really important, because of course film students actually they all understand the logistics and the workflow, but when you actually working on this in terms of the file size and the number of the shot footage is over 1,000 clips, then you really require and needs a lot of sort of like a clear logistics, and that become really important.
No wonder he was worried.
Because you don't want to miss the files actually.
So, Katie, because I was just thinking about this, only just occurred to me now, the difference between training or learning, which is what you come from because you're a second year, and training on a professional shoot. You probably had to do more training than learning. What was your experience when I threw you in at the deep end?
So originally you came to me and you sort of pitched the idea. You asked me to get involved and you pitched the idea, and obviously I was very excited to be part of doing a feature film. And I got brought on as a production assistant to begin with. And then I guess it was just the relationship between the two of us to see how much I could do and, you know, what my skills were. So I think the first thing was to find a wheelie bin. That was the first.
This is what a production assistant does.
Yeah.
You find a wheelie bin.
You needed a wheelie bin, and so I found a wheelie bin, and the very next day I was walking through Norwich to the office and bought in a brand new wheelie bin. And then we had a meeting with our production designer, Simon, who gave me referencing images of different locations that we wanted to film at, ones that he thought would be suitable.
In Norfolk.
In his head. It was just in his...
And then you converted them.
Yeah. So then it was my job to go and find suitable locations, go and find some 3 or 4 different shopping precincts or different bungalows or down a cul-de-sac or this, that, the other. So I sort of I've got 2 kids, so on my way to on the school run or on my way into university, I'd be always looking out for different locations, and then I'd take photographs and see if I could get into contact with the person that owned that. And sometimes it would just be walking up to somebody's house and knocking on their door and asking them if they'd like to be part of a film.
So this was probably an extension of what you were doing in year 2 in your, and taught in the talk classes up to that point.
Yeah.
So what point did it then become? Suddenly you were training as a professional. Was that when you became...
So it was, I didn't feel, at that point in time, I kind of felt like a bit of a facilitator. I was able to do a lot of the tasks that you were asking me. Then you asked if I would like to be a second AD. So I knew that in 3rd year I wanted to specialise in producing. And before I had, done sort of some call sheets and risk assessments and that kind of stuff, but not at the level that we did in Chicken Town. So Top Taran, he came in as first AD. He was working in the industry as a professional.
So explain what's the difference between a first assistant director and a second assistant director? Okay,
so first assistant director, first AD, is the person that they receive the locations, the script. They're the organizer. They're the person who schedules everything and knows what we're going to do when, and they're the person that keeps everything on track, everything on time.
I think people assume that that's what a director does or a producer does, but that's not. The first AD is the absolute general, aren't they?
Yes, they are the number one. The director on set has the relationship with the actors. They are getting them to do what that script is needed, and you have that intimate relationship with those with the stars of the show, really, and you're in that zone. The regimental side of getting everybody in order is the first AD. The second AD...
You were the second AD.
I was the second.
That gives you a sense of how much responsibility you have.
So I worked really closely in the office beforehand because I had got all of the locations, and I knew Norfolk more than Top did. I was able to give him the details that he needed to come up with that shooting schedule. So small things like how long would it take us to get from Norwich City to a location? If we were doing a unit move within the day, how long it would take for us to pack up and move to that second location. So we worked really closely together before filming started, and getting as much information as he needed to be able to do his job well and effectively. And then when it came to the actual shoot days and I was second AD, it was then my job to get all of the call sheets put together for the following day, and the sides, which are the pages of script that we were going to be doing on that day. So you didn't have a whole massive script, you had that. So that was really, I was his right-hand woman, I guess, for everything that he needed. And I suppose it was the detail that he went to for that, or that he needed for his call sheets, and that he wanted to provide everybody, was very different to university. University, your call sheets were simpler because your shoots were simpler. You didn't have the crew that you had. You had sort of, a maximum of sort of 7, maybe 10 crew members, and you were usually only filming in 1 or 2 locations over 3 days. This was a 2.5 week period, and you had professionals and you had different locations, and it needed to be on that professional level. So me being taught that was completely invaluable for whenever I went into the real world and tried to look for a job.
Remember the first shoot day I ever did when I was just out of uni, whatever. The guy at the camera assistant said to me, "Load van, unload van. That's the job."
Yeah,
That's it. That's what filmmaking is. So
Yeah.
all this stuff, when you talk about movement orders and getting the crew around, the actual turning the camera over and working with the actors is a tiny bit in the middle.
Yeah.
Most of it is load van, unload van.
Yeah.
And it's all to make sure that if everything else is running, like your only job is to get your actors to be as real as possible, and to get that out of them, and to physically direct them. You don't want to know what's going on around you, do you?
No, there's all this strange unreal stuff going on of a combination of technical things, moving people around, feeding people.
But I think that's the whole point about the particularly of Chicken Town, especially is it's a feature film, right? It's a feature production. So like you say, Kelly Jo, is that the size of production is actually probably pretty much like 20 times or 30 times much bigger than a student film.
Yeah, I mean, I was looking at the call sheet the other day, and we had 50 crew. I mean, I know that we swapped a lot of people in, and that was including students and stuff, but there were like 50 people. That was a lot of people to make sure that we had everybody to exact location on time.
And in a second year or graduation film, you'd have a crew of how many?
7 to 10.
7 to 10.
Yeah. And then even things like it was my job to find a unit base.
Yes.
So a unit base is somewhere that hair and makeup can be, that your crew can chill out, so it's not on set, it's a space that's separate. And when you're shooting, in the middle of the fence and you're Googling where to go, and it's just this vast nothingness, and then it's like, oh, let's find this really weird little garden centre, and having to like find, and then you have torrential rain, and you're like, remember, you were just sitting.
The first day.
Oh God, you were sitting, and like it was sort of, the roof was leaking almost. But you know, there are other places to go. But there was, you know, those kind of things are really time consuming, but really vital to a production running smoothly, because you want your crew to be, you know, have somewhere that they can relax in their lunch break, somewhere that they can remove themselves from, you know, from where they're filming all day, because it's early mornings and it's late nights and it's
I think the point for this particular big size of or you know, feature film size production, the logistics is really important, and obviously one thing you want to get it right is actually everyone needs to understand what the role is. Yeah. So you create that sort of harmony. And then obviously, Richard, do you remember I did say to you, right? The last thing you want to worry is about the file. It's about the footage. And I know this is my job. I will need to obviously not only just work with the Tansy, who is actually a DOP, and work around in terms of lot or an image as well. But actually, I know I'm working also as a data wrangler. I will make sure we have multiple backups. And that's super important, actually. Yeah.
All these, so it's a combination of these practical movements, but also, you know, technical. It's incredibly technical all at the same time.
Yeah.
Well, it's I think your heads of department were mainly either teachers or professionals in the industry.
Yeah.
And then
the crew for Chicken Town was a combination of experienced HODs, heads of department. So the cinematographer was Tansy, who is a senior lecturer here on the Film and Moving Image Production course. She was the DOP, Director of Photography. The production designer, Simon, is a production designer with 25 years experience in the industry. He worked on 28 Days Later. The makeup artist, Julie, had just come off Gladiator 2 in Malta. She'd been making up Denzel Washington 2 weeks before she came and worked on Chicken Town. But then the crew, and Charlotte Gage, who was the editor, she was working as an assistant editor on Deadpool when she started. She was one of the 5 editors on Deadpool, and then she stepped up to cut this. But then in their teams were graduates or current students like Katie Jo. Yeah. So the camera team had assistants, and these were assistants. These weren't runners. They weren't making tea. This was a second. So the camera team, for example, was Tansy. The first assistant camera, Alexandra Voiku, she is extremely experienced. She was the first assistant camera on The Favourite for Yorgos Lanthimos. So she was teaching Jack McKenna, who was the second AC, who just graduated 2 weeks before. Yeah. And that was replicated all the way through. So each department had 2 to 3 students, or just graduates, who were working hands-on, as Rota says, in the edit department, and that carried through all the way. Apart from costume, actually, the 2 costume designers were a bit newer, because a lot of the characters in the film were young. I thought that we'd take a chance, because they'd know better than I knew what costumes they should the kids in the film should wear. So yes, that was a combination of crew. A combination of experience and newcomers, graduates, really. Yeah,
how wonderful that, you know, you can move from that university environment to actually that work environment where you are just watching somebody and admiring somebody do that job that you would like to do, and that you are learning firsthand by watching, and not only taking part in it, but then, you know, seeing the whole process, and then finally seeing it in the actual cinema was a very proud moment for everybody. Was wonderful to see it come full circle, and to sit with your peers watching something that you created was amazing.
When you're working with the first AD, so hard and soft skills. So you're learning you already knew how to make a call sheet for a crew of 7. But you presumably had there were hard skills where your first AD would explain to you how to do it for.
Yeah, everything was levelled up.
Everything was levelled up. Presumably there's soft skills as well.
Yeah.
Understanding how to behave on a professional set.
Yeah.
Which is something I think is really hard to teach I don't know. Rota finds. I find that this is perhaps the hardest thing to teach in an academic environment. What is it like walking onto a professional set? And that's a sort of soft skill, I would say. What's from your perspective? How do you see
I
that?
suppose for me, so I'm a mature student. So I've worked I used to be an events manager before I decided to sort of go to university and have kids and stuff. So I have worked in a professional environment before. So work ethic is already instilled sort of deeply ingrained into me already. But for younger people who especially during COVID, they weren't able to go and get like jobs like I would have got growing up in hospitality and that kind of stuff. It was just straight from school into university. So I think it was a huge learning curve for people to be able to see how everybody works in a professional environment and how they communicate with each other, and how that there is sort of a hierarchy, but of don't ask Richard because he's doing his job. Ask the person that is above from you, even though that you are our lecturer, and we are comfortable with you. It's like you've got your role, and that person needs to have their role. So it wasn't going straight to you to ask questions. It was who to go to, and am I explaining myself?
Very much so, and that feels like an area of knowledge exchange that was so relevant in this particular production. Very, very hard to teach without putting it in a wrapping it up in a professional context, putting you under some pressure. I would say, giving you responsibility. As Rota says with DIT, there wasn't much margin for error. No. I'm not sure we had many failures, if any that I can think of, but I think under a little bit of pressure, I think the learning actually was accelerated in a way that possibly you have a bit of a safety net if you're learning this kind of thing in an academic space. I'm just looking at how much. But
I think when you're at university, though, you can make those mistakes, and you also have evaluations afterwards. So at university, you do something, and then you evaluate how that went as part of your coursework. You do a reflective summary. So for things that didn't go very well, you write about it, and then you can get a better grade because you've written about the highs and the lows and what you would do differently going forward. I think then when you bring it over to, and yes, some mistakes would have been made in that professional environment, but you work as hard as you possibly can, because you know that there are, that the stakes are higher, and it's not a university project. This is sort of real life, and if it's successful and you've done everybody's done their job well, and you've worked well together, it will set you up for your future, because you can have this on your CV. You've got something to talk about. You've made a feature film, which is so many people that come out of university won't have had that. And it sort of puts you a little bit further forward maybe than somebody else, because you've had that experience and you worked alongside professionals.
What do you feel about problem solving? Because I think this can be quite a challenge if you're studying, if you're learning. Tutors and film staff can't solve all the problems, but actually we often say it's a good thing that there are problems, because they force you to be resourceful, they force you to potentially find creative solutions. I think on a professional shoot, the number of problems is accelerated, but problems get solved much quicker, because the assumption is we don't really even look at those problems. There's never enough money, never enough time. You've got to get your cast from A to B. You want to cast this person, but they're not available, so you have to cast this person instead, and they're not quite as well known, or you cast someone well known and they're only available for 3 days rather than 4. But I think the difference between learning environment and a professional production is that you just assume there are problems. You don't even see them as problems. You just solve them. But whereas perhaps I think when you're learning, it's quite surprising when an actor cancels if you're shooting your graduation film. This is the end of the world. but actually on reflection, I think you learn a huge amount from those challenges, and that's much closer to what it's like in a professional environment. Would you say?
Yeah.
You don't even think about them as being problems. You're problem solving the whole time when you're making a feature film.
I think it makes you a better person. I think it makes you a better professional. You know, in this industry, I think the more hurdles you have to kind of overcome, and the more problems that there are, the more confident you become solving them. Because, as you say, they don't become problems. You're just going to assume that something like that is going to happen, and you always have that kind of backup plan. I think, you know, me now being a producer, you know, in the industry, I always have a backup plan. I always think that everything could go wrong, and that's okay if it does, because there's always a solution.
Yeah.
There's always somebody else looking for a role. There's always another wheelie bin. There's always another location that, okay, it may not be your number one choice, but we can find something and we can make that work.
Yeah.
And I think it definitely makes you a more confident person, and it makes you I don't know.
Sets you up for practice.
Yeah. It does, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. What stood out for me was that although I've been doing this for a long time, you constantly have to reflect on your practice, because you still want to shoot too much in one day, be too ambitious, and I think you forget that. But doing a shoot where you're actually forced to think about working with your own students or recent graduates, it forced me to be much more reflective, when I was shooting, not to be too ambitious, but to find problems, and to make the most of the small resources we had. So I found it forced me to be really, really resourceful. There were too many problems, endless. They're not really problems anyway. You know, it was too hot, it was too cold. There wasn't enough hours in the day. Graham Fellows, forgot his lines. But it was all okay in the end. There was. It's just endless problems, but you just forget them when you're filming. You have this selective memory, don't you?
I think as well, like there are daily problems, like when the unit base wasn't suitable for Julie. She was like, look, the light's not good, there's not enough this, that, the other, and we all went to we had done one day at my house as a unit base, and she's like, can we go back to your house? And I'm like, all right then. So I had the food truck outside my house. It was so
the
hot,
neighbours,
wasn't
the curtain
it?
switching.
And
what is she doing now?
Yeah.
Oh, it's just Katie Jo. Okay, yeah, she's producing a movie from her house.
Oh god, yeah.
Yes.
All the kit, everything in there. And I suppose because I was quite tightly involved with lots of different departments, because I was the maker of call sheets, everybody was coming to me with questions. So I was quite close to everybody in all the different departments, and so I was also hearing of lots of little issues. And I think it's so funny, because it would be one issue one day and then it would be very quickly forgotten about and resolved, and by the end of it, everybody, all those issues or concerns had all been forgotten about, and we all reflected on how wonderful those 2 weeks were, and what an amazing time we all had together. And when we all got together and sort of had drinks, and it was all the highlights, those little things that maybe seemed big at that moment in time weren't that big.
Here's a good example, which was on the first day. One of the leads, Nathaniel, had to ride a bike across the fens. We'd done all the preparation right up to the moment we were about to shoot, and I was with him by the side of the busy road, the A17, A16, and he said to me, he got on the bike and he said, "Oh, just one thing." I said, "What's that?" He said, "I can't ride a bike." So I'm about to push him out into a road of traffic. It wasn't
Yeah.
that bad. I'm embellishing for effect.
Yeah.
Obviously, it wasn't dangerous in any way, but that forced us to rethink. So that became a part of the character
Yeah.
that he couldn't ride a bike,
Yeah.
and then that became a storyline, a plot line in the film. So yeah, as Katie Jo says, it's constant, 100 problems,
Yeah.
but you don't really think about them as problems. You're just solving.
Yeah.
They're just staging posts, taking you into a different creative direction. That's really hard to learn or to teach and learn
Oh yeah.
as an undergraduate,
Yeah.
but becomes second nature once you've done it
Yeah.
on a professional practice level.
Yeah, I mean, not necessarily to sum this up, but I think it's kind of like pretty much gathered you two to talk about these sort of like what you stand out from your perspective. From my view, is actually that cohesion of us as crew, and that because I always value the crew chemistry is the most important thing when you do the production shoot, and Chicken Town is actually really wonderful experience. Actually, not only just for me, for you, but actually for all the crew members as well. And that's the thing. It's like obviously everyone actually had on the same page, had the same goal, and even though everyone actually encountered different problems, but all the same goal is actually we want to make the film, make it happen, and all that pretty much at the end, at the last day shoot. That was a night shoot. We finished at 7:00 in the morning.
Yes.
We still actually, really everyone's enjoy it because we know actually we achieve, this. Wouldn't say mission impossible, but actually in 2 weeks or 2.5 weeks,
It was-
it's
Mission
I
crime.
think
Mission
it was
crime,
amazing what we achieved with
Exactly,
the budget
yeah.
that we had and the things we were able to do and get. I have had people that have production companies here, and they're looking to get a $500,000 budget, and they've messaged me, and we've had words about how to reduce the budget to not that size. They go, how did you make? How are you able
How
to
do you make
make
a
a
film?
feature film on such a small budget?
I think interesting, and I hope, because film shoots can be incredibly hard, and when you're out in the industry, it's a bit of a wild west.
Yeah.
But I think, as Rota says, I hope that we modelled a good example of how a crew can run. That all the people who are going into the industry, like yourself, Katie Jo, who are new, you know what to. You don't know what to expect, because there'll be much worse shoots, much more fragmented. But you know that there is a way of making a film that is collegiate and collaborative. It is possible. So I think that was, as Rota says, that was important to model a way of doing it.
Yeah.
That it doesn't have to be this way in the film industry, particularly. There's an assumption people are treated badly as runners and researchers, because there's a belief somehow that when they rise up the ranks that then they'll earn there, but it doesn't have to be like that. And I think this having a teaching and learning ethos within the production only benefited, I hope.
And also, I think it was beautiful that we were able to highlight so many different areas of Norfolk. Like, but by going out to, further afield and then sort of closer to Norwich, we were able to highlight that this is a region which has, so many different locations for different things that come here and, make your film here, because people are lovely here.
I don't think enough students get out and shoot outside the city, and that's something we should do. So we're recording this a few days before the nationwide theatrical release of Chicken Town on Friday the 27th of June. So theatrical release, so that means cinema release. We're going to be in about 30 to 40 sites all over the UK, including Norwich, including London as well, which is quite exciting. And so it will be on general release in cinemas from the 27th of June, which everyone says, oh, that's amazing. But I knew we were going to get there right from the start. We were always going to get there.
We were, definitely.
Always deliver. But no, it's not a foregone conclusion. Producing and releasing a film in the UK, huge number of steps. We've just talked about the process of making it here at the university, but it's a huge challenge, but it's nice to be able to show that it can be done.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, Friday 27th in cinemas.
Near
Near you.
you. You must give us.